See this plant, the one loaded down with tomatoes? Is yours like that? No? It comes down to just 5 old free tricks that nobody ever taught you. Same soil, same season, but twice the harvest. The folks who live off the land know them, but you won't find them printed on a seed packet. My father taught me these, and his father taught him. And today I, Amos Reel, will show you 5 tricks that completely change a plant. Let's begin. Secret 1. At first it looks like you're ruining the seedling. Don't dig a deep hole. Dig a shallow trench and lay the seedling on its side, covering almost the whole stem with soil, leaving only the leafy top sticking out. Right now you're thinking, bury the stem, won't it just rot? The opposite. Here's the secret. A tomato stem is covered in sleeping buds. The moment they sit in damp soil, a new root pushes out of each one. So in a couple of weeks, one weak little sprout turns into a plant with a huge root system, and big roots mean water in the heat and food and a firm footing. And look how much you get from one move. A plant like this handles drought better and stands stronger in the wind. It also starts growing earlier. Roots in warm soil wake up faster, and you don't have to stake it for longer. Recognize your own seedlings. Pale, stretched out, flopping over. Those are the ones to lay down sideways like they were made for it. Your neighbor's plant stands on one thin little root. Yours holds on by the whole stem. Drop some marigolds at the base and basil alongside in that same trench. An old habit. Marigolds drive the soil pest away from the roots, and basil keeps pests off. That's how my father planted, laid the seedlings on their side, and chuckled at the neighbors. By the way, for 200 years, Europeans thought the tomato was poisonous. They grew it just for looks and called it the love apple. Our final 2 are one cut at the end of the season that ripens you 20 to 30 extra tomatoes. But first, secret 2. Almost everyone feeds wrong. They scatter blue powder right at the root. The plant gulps it down, shoots up tall, thick, and dark green, with hardly any fruit set. Recognize that plant in your own garden? That's overfeeding. Nitrogen drives leaves, not fruit. You'll say, a brew is a hassle, it smells, easier to buy a bag. True enough, but here's the difference. My grandfather used to say, the soil is alive and you feed it, not the plant. Down in the soil, there's a whole world, fungi and bacteria, and they slowly turn the compost into food the root takes up evenly, without shooting up into leaves. Powder hits all at once and misses. A brew feeds it quietly and just enough. The way is simple. A rain barrel and a handful or 2 of aged manure or compost. Let it steep a few days, and pour that tea at the root. No manure. The same comes from a bucket of young nettle left to ferment in water a couple of weeks. Rainwater is softer than tap, and the plant loves it. And look how much you get at once. The brew costs nothing. It doesn't burn the roots like powder. It feeds the soil for years to come, and it makes the plant tougher. A plant fed by living soil gets sick less. In a week or 2, the leaves are greener, the stem stronger, then comes the bloom, and bloom is tomorrow's tomatoes. My grandfather never bought a single bag of fertilizer in his life, and his tomatoes were the envy of the whole county. By the way, a tomato is botanically a berry, not a vegetable, and it was the U.S. Supreme Court that named it a vegetable back in 1893, just to tax it. And next, the thing you usually throw in the trash, and that's a shame. It fills out the fruit and saves it from rot. Secret 3. While you're digging the hole, drop in 2 things from your own house. You'll say, ash and eggshell, that's old wives' tales. You'll see why it isn't. First, a handful of wood ash from the stove, that's potassium, and potassium works like a pump. It drives sugars into the fruit, makes it big and sweet, and with that one move, you get a couple of bonuses. The ash takes the edge off sour soil, the way tomatoes like, and it keeps slugs and ants off the stem. Second, a handful of crushed eggshell or a spoon of lime, that's calcium. And calcium is the building material for the fruit's walls. Without it, the bottom of the tomato caves in with a black sunken rot. Recognize that trouble on yours? That's it, a lack of calcium. But I'll tell you straight, calcium only gets taken up with water with even watering. So water deep and at the root, and cover the top with straw to keep the moisture steady. Ash, eggshell, and steady water. And you'll forget about blossom end rot. At our place, the stove ash piled up in a bucket by the door all winter, right in time for planting. By the way, the tomato comes from the slopes of the Andes in South America, and its wild ancestors were no bigger than a pea. The one who knows the final two secrets gets by with 10 plants instead of 50. Guess who that's bad for? Why is this no longer taught? Ash, eggshell, nettle, and a bucket of rainwater don't sell the way a bag of powder with a giant tomato on the label does. The knowledge quietly settled into old gardens, while a whole country grows lush green plants that give half of what they could. Be the one who remembered the old way. Secret 4. There's a kind myth that a plant is better left alone. With a tomato, it works against you. In every fork where a leaf comes off the stem, in the plant's armpit, a sucker grows. You feel bad snapping off a healthy shoot, I understand, but look what it does. Leave it, and it becomes a second plant, with its own leaves and fruit set, and every one of those leaves pulls sugars to itself. The plant scatters its strength across a dozen weak branches instead of a handful of strong fruits. Recognize your own jungle of a plant, a mountain of leaves, and the tomatoes, small and late. That's exactly it. Once a week, walk the row and snap off the young suckers with your fingers while they're small. The overgrown ones cut with a clean blade and wipe it between plants. On a dirty one, tomatoes spread disease. And from that one move, you get several things at once. The fruit ripens bigger and earlier, the plant breathes and gets sick less, and you can see the ripe ones right away instead of digging through leaves. And here's the forgotten part. Don't throw out the sucker you broke off. Stand fresh willow branches in a jar. Hold them until the water turns pale amber, and set the sucker in it. Willow wakes the roots in it. In a couple of weeks, you've got a free new plant of the same variety. That's how the old folks raised dozens of plants from a couple of favorites, for free, from what everyone tosses on the compost. By the way, a tomato stem can grow roots anywhere along it. That's why a sucker takes, and why planting sideways works. And here's the last trick, the strongest of the 5. One fall cut, and the plant feeds you to the end of the season. Secret 5. At the end of summer, 3 or 4 weeks before the first frost, the plant is still climbing, pushing out new flowers and tiny fruit set. But not one of them will have time to ripen. The frost will kill it. Here's what almost nobody thinks about. The plant won't stop on its own. It's built that way. It grows and blooms until it dies. It doesn't know about frost. And every drop of strength going into new growth is stolen from the green tomatoes already hanging that could have ripened. Your hand won't go to cut a living plant full of flowers, I know. But you're not being cruel. You're just telling it The season is over. Stop growing, ripen what you've got. So stop it for it. Cut off the top, hard, a hand or two down, flowers and all. In a few days, all that strength turns toward the hanging fruit, and the green ones you'd given up on blush and turn red. Recognize how every year half the plant goes under the snow still green? With this cut, you save them, and several winds at once. More ripe ones, they come faster and bigger and less fuss for you in the fall. One plant like that gives 20 to 30 extra ripe tomatoes in September that would otherwise have rotted green. My grandfather walked the row with a knife in September, and our whole shed hung full of ripening clusters right up to the cold. Green tomatoes ripen just fine off the vine, on a windowsill or in newspaper. So by cutting the plant, you lose nothing. Think of someone whose tomatoes burn up every July. Send them this video, subscribe, and hit like. And in the next video, you'll find out about 10 vegetables that'll keep your table stocked all year.